Israel is, I think, in the public sentiment completely has lost, I think, public sentiment. Why do it now? What is the strategy behind striking Iran now, expanding to Iran now? And then also, what is the strategy behind the US directly striking the three nuclear facilities when they had the diplomatic cover of, oh, it's Israel going rogue?
Yes, it's good questions. Here we need to differentiate slightly between the Israeli and the US position. Israel feels existentially threatened by Iran. And this dates back to 1979, when the Islamic Revolution occurred. This revolution was built on the basis that regional Western hegemony needs to be uprooted. And the crux of that is the Israeli occupation entity. Ayatollah Khomeini, Imam Khomeini, went out and famously said that Israel is a cancer that needs to be uprooted. So we also know that Iran materially provided and was the backbone support for the Palestinian resistance on the ground and all the resistances in the region, not just the Islamic resistances, but also the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine prior to that, which is a Marxist group. This explains why Netanyahu comes out and says that the biggest threat to Israel is, this was on a CNN interview, he said it's number one, Iran, number two, Iran, and number three, Iran. So had Iran retreated within its borders and ceased to influence the region's peoples and its active forces, then the issue would have been settled a long time ago, and we wouldn't be in this confrontation in the first place. Israel is trying right now, in every way and shape and form, to shape the region of West Asia the way that it wants, because ultimately this is a reflection of an existential crisis that it is going through. Today, there is, you could say, a big question mark surrounding the very fate of Israel. The security apparatus that all the countries of the region are built on, the Sykes-Picot divides of the last century, those are all threatened with collapse. And there is fear today of Israel losing its hegemony. And there is a fear that the spirit of resistance from the nations that are against these pliant Western regimes will threaten the whole Western setup for the region. That explains the kind of crazy desperation that we see from the Western side. It's as though someone is losing something. Israel, we know, has been lobbying America for this war for decades. When it failed to get America to fight this war on its behalf, that is when it requested that it begins the war itself, and it sought to drag America in. But I would argue that Israel is the tool in America's hand and not America in Israel's hand. And this is important to understand. America won't be dragged to Israel's square unless it deems that dragging within its own interest. So the main goal over here is expanding Israel's size so that it becomes the main regional player within Trump's new regional vision, which is actually a stable region. Trump wants a stable region, acting as the main power. So Israel acts as the main power in the stable region on behalf of the West, and all of America's deals will be pushed through its economic plans. That's what the whole Abraham Accords was about. It was an integrated economic bloc in this region, with the Israeli occupation entity at the core of that. And we know that Israel's size within 80% of historic Palestine that it occupied in 1948 is deemed not enough today to play this role, given its sheer and utter failure on the ground, which is why Trump came out in his election spree last year and he said that Israel is so thin it needs fattening up. But as we've been mentioning in this podcast, that this quote unquote new Middle East project, this dream, hasn't been actualized due to Israel's failures. So then one asks the question, why did America allow the green lighting of the Israeli attack on Iran if it's so lethal? Ultimately, we're seeing Israel being used as collateral over here. Like, it was Israel that was bearing the brunt. The only brunt that America bared was 6 missile strikes in the Al-Udeid base in Qatar, and some reports said also the Ain al-Assad base in Iraq, but they had already evacuated all of their main assets. So it was the equivalent of, bombing a runaway, but it's still very symbolically strong that Iran would strike for the second time historically an American base in this region of strategic importance. No other entity or country ever dares to do that. That's tantamount to waging war in America. So America greenlit this Israeli attack on Iran because America itself is interested in measuring the response from Iran's side. Accordingly, they will shape the future of regional confrontations. If Iran's reaction proves decisive, this is in America's mind, then the hit will severely weaken Israel. And this could change the whole political regional landscape. And even American support for Israel in this case will shrink because Israel would have proved itself to be a complete drain, a complete financial drain on America without playing the functional role for which it was created. But on the other hand, if Iran practices restraint, if its response is weak, this gives an indication that the whole of the resistance axis is weak, and Israel in this would emerge much stronger. So America was interested in seeing the credibility of Iran in how it would respond, and it wanted to test that out. And as I mentioned, in all of that, Israel is basically the collateral because it was the one that was sustaining the damage. So really, if America cared about Israeli interests, would it allow it to bear the brunt to this degree? It's almost so suicidal and like shooting itself in the foot. But we know that America, in the first place, just because you mentioned the negotiation files, we know that it opened the negotiations for the nuclear file, not because it's so interested in the nuclear per se, but as Trump himself admitted, the ultimate goal is Iranian submission. That's the whole point. And we know that Iran did not submit in the peak of the negotiations to the what became the zero enrichment imposition by Trump. And we know that Iran was struck in the back. In the middle of these negotiations, that's when the Israeli confrontation occurred under direct American support. So, from the Western side, America is using Israel as that collateral to test Iran's capabilities, bearing in mind America, even before Israel, wishes for the Islamic Republic system to fall. That's their ultimate dream. When they failed in this is when we saw America decided to get involved and it hit the 3 nuclear sites. This was also a testing waters to see how effective the American dose really is in capitulating Iran. It was almost like raising the dose a little bit more, seeing if the American side directly intervenes, would Iran capitulate and surrender? But in reality, they're not measuring the real harm because no one can really estimate or measure the real harm that was incurred on these strikes on Iran. When Iran proved that it was willing to go all the way and then hit American assets, that's when they begged for a ceasefire. It was the American and Israeli side that begged for a ceasefire. Otherwise, Iran was happy to continue. And the Western side felt a kind of defeat in changing the system or the policies of the system within the Islamic Republic. They thought they can turn the people against the government. If we remember, that was the primary goal, it's regime change. But the people proved the complete opposite. They rallied behind the government. And so here, when we analyze the Israeli and the American position, we know America wanted a quick hit to succeed. Trump's temperament is one where he lacks patience. He doesn't want a bleeding war, especially after it was shown what Iran's strength was that can harm America and lead to big harm within the Israeli occupation entity that was running out of interceptors that were also extremely costly. So to contextualize it, the request to end the war was critical for Israel and America, despite Israel insisting that Iran remains an existential threat to it, and even more so if it turns into a nuclear power. And today, we see, even with Netanyahu's visit to America, it's still lobbying America to inflict a greater harm on Iran and to take Iran outside the realm of influence. So it's still betting on dragging America into a war. The policy of Iran and its influence that refuses Western imposition is something that they ultimately want to crush. That's the main objective behind all of this.